The winter wind cut through Katherine Davies like a blade as she stood in the snow outside the abandoned trading post, one hand pressed against her swollen belly, the other clutching the note her husband had left on the kitchen table that morning. Gone to California. Don't follow. The words blurred as tears froze on her cheeks, and she understood with terrible clarity that James had abandoned her, 6 months pregnant, in the dead of a Nevada winter with nothing but the clothes on her back and $12 sewn into her petticoat. She had walked 3 miles from their cabin to Genoa, hoping desperately that he had simply gone to town, but the empty saloon and the pitying looks from the few townspeople brave enough to face the December cold told her everything she needed to know. Her legs gave out, and she sank against the rough wooden wall of the building, her breath coming in short gasps that sent white clouds into the frigid air. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if protesting this sudden change in circumstances, and Catherine wrapped both arms around her middle, trying to provide warmth that she herself did not possess. Snow had begun to fall again, thick flakes that stuck to her dark hair and the worn wool of her coat. She had no family, no friends in this remote Nevada settlement, and the sun was already beginning its descent toward the Sierra Nevada mountains in the west. "Madam?" The voice was deep and concerned, and Catherine looked up to see a tall figure approaching through the swirling snow. He wore a heavy coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the wind, and as he drew closer, she could make out a young face, weathered by sun and wind, but kind in its expression. "Madam, you cannot stay out here. This storm is getting worse." Catherine tried to stand, but her frozen limbs would not cooperate. "I am fine," she managed to say, though her chattering teeth made a liar of her. The man crouched down beside her, and she saw that he was perhaps 25 or 26 years old, with dark hair visible beneath his hat and gray eyes that studied her with genuine worry. "You are not fine," he said firmly. "You are half frozen and about to be buried in snow. My name is Kieran Prescott. I have a ranch about 2 miles north of here. Please let me help you." "My husband," Catherine started, but her voice broke. Kieran glanced around the empty street, then back at her. His expression shifted to understanding, and something harder passed through his eyes. "I do not see any husband here, madam. I see a woman who needs shelter and warmth before this storm kills her and her baby both." The bluntness of his words cut through the fog of shock that had settled over Catherine's mind. She nodded slowly, and Kieran immediately moved to help her stand, supporting her weight with an arm around her shoulders. He was strong and steady, and Catherine found herself leaning against him as they made their way to where a sturdy buckskin horse stood tied to a post, its coat already white with accumulated snow. "Can you ride?" Kieran asked, and when Catherine shook her head, he simply said, "Then I will lift you up, and I will walk alongside to steady you." True to his word, Kieran lifted her into the saddle with surprising gentleness, then took the reins and began leading the horse north through the deepening snow. Catherine clung to the saddle horn with both hands, her body swaying with each step the horse took. The wind howled around them, and she lost track of time, aware only of the cold and the steady rhythm of movement and Kieran's broad back ahead of her as he forged a path through the storm. When they finally reached the ranch, Catherine could barely keep her eyes open. She had a vague impression of a sturdy log house with smoke rising from the chimney, a barn, and several outbuildings, all nearly invisible through the white curtain of falling snow. Kieran lifted her down from the horse and half carried her to the house, kicking the door open and bringing her into sudden blessed warmth. The interior of the house was simple but well built, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall and a fire crackling cheerfully within it. Kieran guided Catherine to a chair near the hearth and immediately began removing her wet coat and boots. "I need to get you warm," he explained as he worked. "Frostbite can set in fast." Catherine sat numbly as Kieran wrapped her in thick blankets and brought her a cup of hot broth from a pot hanging over the fire. "Drink this slowly," he instructed, and she obeyed, feeling the warmth spread through her chest and belly. The baby shifted again, and she placed a hand over the movement, reassuring herself that her child was still alive, still fighting. Kieran disappeared into another room and returned with dry clothes. "These were my mother's," he said quietly. "She passed 2 years ago. They should fit you well enough." He turned his back to give her privacy, and Catherine quickly changed out of her damp dress, grateful for the soft cotton and warm wool of the borrowed garments. "Thank you," she whispered when she was dressed again. Kieran turned back around and nodded. "You are safe here," he said simply. "The storm will likely last several days. When it clears, we can talk about what comes next. For now, you need rest and food." Over the next hours, as the storm raged outside and night fell in earnest, Catherine learned that Kieran Prescott was a cattleman who had inherited this ranch from his father 5 years earlier. He ran a small operation with help from two ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse, though they had gone to Carson City for supplies 3 days ago and would not return until after the storm passed. He was practical and efficient, preparing a simple but nourishing meal of venison stew and biscuits, insisting that Catherine eat her fill. "The baby needs it," he said, when she protested that she was taking his food. As she ate, Catherine found herself studying him. Kieran moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own space, and there was a gentleness to his actions that contrasted with his rough appearance. He had removed his coat, revealing a lean, muscular build and a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His hands were calloused from hard work, but they had been tender when helping her. "Why did you help me?" Catherine asked finally. "You do not know me. For all you know, I could be trouble." Kieran looked up from the fire he was tending. "I know what it looks like when someone has been abandoned," he said quietly. "I know what it looks like when someone has nowhere else to go. My mother and I were alone for years before my father finally sent for us. I remember what it felt like to be helpless and cold and scared." He paused, then added, "Besides, it is the right thing to do. A man who would leave his pregnant wife in winter is no man at all." The words were spoken matter-of-factly, but Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes again. She had been trying so hard to hold herself together, to be strong. But Kieran's simple kindness was breaking down her defenses. "I do not understand why he left," she whispered. "We were going to have a baby. We were going to be a family." Kieran crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, his expression serious. "That is his failing, not yours," he said firmly. "Whatever his reasons, whatever was in his head, the choice he made was his alone. You did nothing wrong." Catherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Kieran stood and gestured toward a door on the far side of the room. "That is my parents' old room. You will sleep there tonight. I will take the loft." When Catherine started to protest, he held up a hand. "It is not up for discussion. You need proper rest, and that bed is far more comfortable than anywhere else in this house." Too exhausted to argue, Catherine allowed Kieran to help her to the bedroom, where she found a large bed covered in quilts and a window that looked out onto the white wilderness. She crawled beneath the covers and was asleep almost before her head touched the pillow. Her last conscious thought, a wordless prayer of gratitude for the stranger who had saved her life. She woke the next morning to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a moment, Catherine was disoriented, and then the events of the previous day came flooding back. She sat up slowly, her body aching from cold and exhaustion, and placed a hand on her belly. The baby kicked reassuringly, and she took a deep breath before rising and making her way into the main room. Kieran stood at the stove, and he turned when he heard her approach. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Better," Catherine admitted. "Warmer, at least." "Good." Kieran gestured to the table where he had already set out plates and cups. "Sit. Breakfast is almost ready." As they ate, Catherine found herself relaxing slightly. The storm continued outside, but inside the house was warm and secure. Kieran was easy company, speaking little, but not in an uncomfortable way. He asked her no prying questions, made no demands, simply shared his space and his food as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The storm should clear by tomorrow, Kieran said as he cleared the dishes. But the snow will be deep. Travel will be difficult for several days after that. Katherine nodded, then took a breath. I have $12, she said. It is all I have, but I can pay you for your help. And once I can get to Carson City, I can look for work. I was a seamstress back in Ohio. Surely someone needs alterations or mending. Kieran turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. And what about when the baby comes? That is only a few months away by the look of things. 3 months, Katherine confirmed. But I am strong. I can work right up until the birth, and after a few weeks, I can work again. With a newborn baby? In the middle of winter? Kieran shook his head. That is not a plan. That is a recipe for disaster. Katherine felt her face flush. What would you have me do? I cannot impose on your charity forever. I have to find a way to support myself and my child. Kieran crossed his arms and leaned against the counter. You could stay here, he said quietly. Katherine stared at him. What? Stay here, through the winter at least, until the baby is born and you are strong enough to travel safely. Kieran's expression was serious. I have the space and I could use help around the house. My ranch hands are good men, but they are cowboys, not housekeepers. The place has been falling apart since my mother died. You could cook and clean, and in exchange you would have shelter and food. I could not, Katherine started, but Kieran interrupted her. Why not? It is a fair trade. You need a safe place to have your baby, and I need someone to keep this house running properly. There is no shame in it. Katherine wanted to protest, to insist that she could not accept such generosity from a stranger, but the practical part of her mind was already calculating. She was 6 months pregnant, alone, with almost no money. The chances of her finding work and a safe place to live before the baby came were slim at best. And Kieran was right. Trying to work with a newborn in the dead of winter would be nearly impossible. Just through the winter? She asked carefully. Through the winter, Kieran confirmed. And then if you want to leave, I will take you to Carson City myself and help you find work and lodging. But I think you should give yourself and your baby the best possible chance, and that means staying somewhere safe and warm until spring. Katherine looked around the house, taking in the dust on the shelves and the dishes piled in the wash basin. She thought about the alternative, about trying to survive alone in a town where she knew no one, where her husband's desertion would mark her as something pitiable or worse. Here at least, she would have purpose and dignity. All right, she said finally. Through the winter, and I will earn my keep. Kieran's face relaxed into something that might have been a smile. Good, then that is settled. The storm continued for another day and a half, and during that time, Katherine began to settle into the rhythm of the house. She was determined to prove her worth, so despite Kieran's protests, she started cleaning and organizing. The kitchen was first, and she scoured every pot and pan, scrubbed the floor, and organized the pantry. Kieran watched her with a mixture of amusement and concern, clearly wanting to tell her to rest, but recognizing that she needed to feel useful. On the second day, Katherine found a box of her predecessor's belongings in the bedroom, and with Kieran's permission, she went through them carefully. There were dresses that would fit her after the baby was born, a beautiful shawl, and at the bottom of the box, a stack of letters tied with ribbon. Katherine did not read them, but she set them aside, thinking Kieran might want to keep them separately. When she emerged with the letters, Kieran was sitting by the fire, mending a broken harness. He looked up, and something in his expression shifted when he saw what she held. I found these, Katherine said softly. I thought you might want them. Kieran set down the harness and took the letters, his fingers tracing the faded ink of the top envelope. My mother wrote these to my father during the years they were apart, he said quietly. I had forgotten they were in there. Katherine sat down across from him. Years apart? Kieran nodded, his gaze still on the letters. My father came west in '49 during the gold rush. My mother and I stayed in Missouri because she was afraid of the journey. He was supposed to send for us within a year, but things were hard and it took him 5 years to make enough money to bring us out. By then, I was 6 years old and barely remembered him. That must have been difficult, Katherine said. It was harder on my mother, Kieran admitted. She waited for him, worked as a laundress to support us, wrote him letters every month, even though his replies were few and far between. When we finally came west in '54, she was so happy. She loved this place, loved the ranch, loved having a real home again. He paused, then added, she and my father had 10 good years together before he died in a riding accident. Then she had 2 years alone before a fever took her. I am sorry, Katherine said, and she meant it. She could hear the grief in Kieran's voice, the weight of loss that he carried. She was a good woman, Kieran said simply. Strong and kind. I think she would have liked you. The comment surprised Katherine, and she felt warmth spread through her chest. I hope I would have liked her too. That night, after supper, Kieran brought out a worn deck of cards and taught Katherine how to play poker. She had never gambled before, and she was terrible at it, but Kieran was patient and good-humored, and soon they were both laughing as Katherine lost hand after hand. You are the worst card player I have ever seen, Kieran said with genuine amusement. I was raised to believe gambling was sinful, Katherine protested, but she was smiling too. It is only sinful if you are good at it and take other people's money, Kieran countered. Since you are losing spectacularly, I think you are safe from damnation. The easy banter felt good, normal, and Katherine realized with a start that she had not thought about James for several hours. The pain was still there, a constant ache beneath her ribs, but it was no longer overwhelming. Perhaps Kieran was right. Perhaps James's leaving was his failing, not hers. Perhaps she could build a new life, even if it was not the life she had planned. The storm finally broke on the third day, and Katherine woke to brilliant sunshine streaming through the window. The world outside was transformed, buried under several feet of pristine, white snow that glittered like diamonds in the morning light. Kieran was already up, and when Katherine joined him, he was pulling on his heavy coat. I need to check on the cattle, he explained. They should be all right in the south pasture where there is some shelter from the trees, but I need to make sure. I will be gone most of the day. Be careful, Katherine said, and Kieran gave her a quick nod before heading out into the cold. Alone in the house, Katherine threw herself into work with renewed energy. She scrubbed floors, washed windows, and baked bread using flour and starter she found in the pantry. The physical labor felt good, grounding, and by the time Kieran returned in the late afternoon, stomping snow from his boots, the house was cleaner than it had been in months, and filled with the warm smell of fresh bread. Kieran stopped in the doorway and looked around, his expression one of surprise. You have been busy, he said. I told you I would earn my keep, Katherine replied. She cut a thick slice of bread and spread it with butter, handing it to Kieran. How are the cattle? They made it through, Kieran said around a mouthful of bread. Lost one old steer, but the rest are fine. This bread is incredible. It is my mother's recipe, Katherine said. She taught me to bake when I was young. Over the following weeks, a routine established itself. Kieran would rise before dawn to tend to the animals and handle the endless tasks required to keep the ranch running, while Katherine managed the house, cooking meals, washing clothes, and slowly working her way through years of accumulated clutter and neglect. His ranch hands, two brothers named Tom and Billy Morrison, returned from Carson City, and Katherine found herself cooking for 4 instead of 2. The brothers were surprised to find a woman at the ranch, but quickly grew to appreciate her cooking and the general improvement in their living conditions. Christmas came quietly. Katherine had not expected to celebrate, but on Christmas Eve, Kieran appeared with a small pine tree that he set up in the corner of the main room. My mother always insisted on a tree, he explained, looking almost embarrassed. Together, they decorated it with strings of dried berries and small ornaments that Kieran's mother had collected over the years. On Christmas morning, Kieran gave Catherine a beautiful shawl made from soft wool. I bought it in Carson City last spring, he said. I was going to sell it, but I think you should have it. Catherine was overwhelmed. She had nothing to give him in return, but Kieran waved away her apologies. You have already given me more than enough, he said. This house has not felt like a home in 2 years. Now it does. As winter deepened and January turned to February, Catherine found herself growing more comfortable in Kieran's presence. They fell into easy conversation during meals, sharing stories of their pasts. Catherine learned that Kieran had been engaged once to a girl in Virginia City, but she had broken it off when she realized how isolated the ranch was. She wanted city life, Kieran explained without bitterness. Parties and society. I could not give her that. Her loss, Catherine said firmly, and Kieran had looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. For her part, Catherine told Kieran about her childhood in Ohio, about her parents who had died of cholera when she was 17, about meeting James at a church social and believing he was everything she had ever wanted. He seemed so confident and ambitious, she said. He talked about going west and making a fortune, and I thought it would be an adventure. I thought we would build something together. What happened? Kieran asked gently. Catherine shook her head. I do not know. After we married and came to Nevada, he changed. He was always restless, always looking for the next opportunity. The cabin we rented in Genoa was supposed to be temporary, just until he struck it rich in the mines, but nothing ever panned out. He grew bitter and distant, and I tried so hard to make him happy, but nothing I did was enough. She placed a hand on her swollen belly. When I told him I was pregnant, I thought he would be pleased. Instead, he looked at me like I had trapped him, like the baby was a burden he had not agreed to carry. He is a fool, Kieran said flatly. That baby is a blessing, and so are you. The words, spoken with such conviction, brought tears to Catherine's eyes. I hope my child never knows that their father abandoned them, she whispered. Kieran reached across the table and covered her hand with his own. Your child will know that they are loved and wanted. That is what matters. The touch of his hand, warm and strong, sent an unexpected jolt through Catherine. She looked up and found Kieran watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a long moment, neither of them moved, and Catherine was acutely aware of every point where their skin connected. Then Kieran cleared his throat and pulled his hand back, standing abruptly. I should check on the horses, he muttered, grabbing his coat and disappearing into the cold before Catherine could respond. She sat at the table for a long time afterward, her hand still tingling from his touch, her mind racing. What was happening? She was pregnant with another man's child, abandoned and alone. She had no right to feel attraction, to notice the way Kieran's eyes crinkled when he smiled, or how safe she felt when he was near. And yet she could not deny that something was shifting between them, some connection that went deeper than gratitude or convenience. That night, Catherine lay in bed and felt the baby kick strongly beneath her hands. What am I going to do? She whispered to the child growing inside her. I am falling in love with him, and I have no right to. February brought a brief thaw, and Kieran took advantage of the break in the weather to make a trip into Genoa for supplies. He asked Catherine if she wanted to come, but she declined, not ready to face the town and its questions. Instead, she spent the day baking and sewing, trying not to worry about what people might say when they saw Kieran shopping for things like calico fabric and women's stockings. When Kieran returned in the evening, he was carrying several bundles and wearing an odd expression. Catherine met him at the door, and he set his packages down carefully before speaking. I ran into your husband, he said, without preamble. Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. James, but he went to California. Apparently he changed his mind, or maybe he never left in the first place. Kieran's jaw was tight with suppressed anger. He was in the saloon, drunk as a lord, complaining about the wife who could not give him a moment's peace and the baby he never wanted. The words hit Katherine like physical blows. She sat down heavily, one hand pressed to her chest. What did you do? I told him I knew where his wife was and that she was safe and well cared for, Kieran said. I told him that if he had any decency at all, he would sign papers giving up his parental rights so the child could be raised by someone who actually wanted it. Katherine gasped. Kieran, you did not. I did. Kieran pulled a folded document from his coat pocket. And drunk as he was, greedy as he was, he signed it. I paid him $50 to walk away from you and the baby forever, and he took the money and did not even ask where you were or how you were doing. Katherine took the paper with shaking hands. It was a simple document, written in the careful hand of Genoa's Justice of the Peace, stating that James Davies relinquished all rights and responsibilities to the child Katherine carried. James's signature was a scrawled mess at the bottom, but it was legal and witnessed. Why? Katherine whispered. Why would you do this? Kieran knelt in front of her chair, his gray eyes serious and intent. Because you deserve better than to spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering if he will come back and claim the child out of spite or greed, because your baby deserves to grow up free of him. He paused, then added more quietly, and because I am hoping that you might consider staying here, not just through the winter, but permanently. Katherine's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Kieran must be able to hear it. I do not understand. I think you do, Kieran said gently. I think you feel the same thing I feel. This started as me helping someone in need, but Katherine, it has become so much more than that. You have made this house a home again. You have made me remember what it feels like to have something worth coming home to at the end of a hard day. He took a breath. I know the timing is terrible. I know you are still dealing with what James did, and you are about to have a baby. I am not asking you to make any decisions right now. I am just asking you to consider the possibility that maybe, when you are ready, we could be a family. You, me, and the baby. Tears were streaming down Katherine's face, but for the first time in months, they were not tears of sadness. You want to raise another man's child? I want to raise your child, Kieran corrected. And I swear to you, if you give me the chance, I will love that baby as if they were my own blood. I will be the father that James should have been. I will be the husband you deserve. Katherine set the document aside and reached out to touch Kieran's face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly. I am falling in love with you, she admitted in a whisper. I have been fighting it because I thought I had no right, but Kieran, I am falling in love with you. Kieran's eyes opened, and the joy in them took Katherine's breath away. Then stop fighting it, he said. Let yourself feel it. Let yourself be happy. I am afraid, Katherine confessed. I trusted James, and he destroyed me. What if I am wrong about you, too? You are not wrong, Kieran said firmly. He took her hands in his, holding them carefully. I am not James. I am not going to leave you or hurt you. I am going to stand by you through everything that comes, good and bad. That is a promise. Katherine searched his face, looking for any hint of deception or doubt, but she found only honesty and determination. Slowly, she nodded. Then yes, she said. Yes, I want to stay. Yes, I want to try to build something real with you. Kieran pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly, and held her close. Katherine rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart, feeling safer and more content than she had in years. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's warmth, while outside the wind began to pick up and snow started to fall once more. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Katherine had ever known. Kieran courted her properly, despite the fact that they were living under the same roof. He brought her wildflowers that he found poking through the snow, read to her in the evenings from his small collection of books, and treated her with a gentleness and respect that made her fall deeper in love with him every day. As her pregnancy progressed, Kieran became increasingly protective. He insisted that she rest more, that she not lift anything heavy, that she take care of herself. Catherine found his concern endearing, even when it bordered on excessive. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I know that," Kieran said, taking the basket from her anyway, "but I also know that you push yourself too hard. Let me help. Please." How could she argue with that? Catherine was learning that Kieran expressed love through action, through the small and large ways he cared for her. He made sure she had the most comfortable chair by the fire. He rubbed her aching feet in the evenings without being asked. He talked to her belly, telling the baby stories about the ranch and making promises about all the things they would do together. "When you are old enough, I will teach you to ride," Kieran said one night, his hand resting gently on Catherine's stomach. "We will go up into the mountains, and I will show you the meadows where the wildflowers grow so thick you cannot see the ground. And I will teach you to rope and brand cattle and how to tell when a storm is coming by the way the clouds look." "What if the baby is a girl?" Catherine asked, amused. "Then I will teach her all those things anyway," Kieran said firmly. "A girl can be just as good a rancher as a boy. My mother could outride and outshoot half the men in this valley." Catherine laughed and covered Kieran's hand with her own. "You are going to be a wonderful father," she said softly. Kieran looked up at her, his expression tender. "I am going to try my very best." In early March, with the snow beginning to melt and the first signs of spring appearing, Kieran asked Catherine to marry him properly. They were sitting outside on the porch, enjoying the weak sunshine, when he suddenly went down on one knee in front of her. "Katherine Davies, I know we have only known each other for a few months, but they have been the best months of my life," Kieran said. "I love you with everything I am. I love your strength and your kindness and your stubborn refusal to let the world beat you down. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy and keeping you safe. Will you marry me?" He produced a simple gold band, and Catherine recognized it as the ring his mother had worn. "It was my grandmother's," Kieran explained. "My mother left it to me to give to the woman I married. I cannot think of anyone more worthy of wearing it." "Yes," Catherine said through happy tears. "Yes, I will marry you." Kieran slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he stood and kissed her gently, his hands cradling her face. It was their first real kiss, and it was sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "We should do it soon," Catherine said, "before the baby comes." "Next week," Kieran agreed. "We will go to Genoa and have the justice of the peace perform the ceremony. Tom and Billy can be our witnesses." True to his word, the following week, Kieran arranged everything. They made the journey to Genoa on a bright March morning, and Catherine wore one of Kieran's mother's dresses, altered to fit over her pregnant belly. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, performed in the justice of the peace's parlor, with Tom and Billy looking on with broad smiles. When the justice pronounced them husband and wife, Kieran kissed Catherine with a tenderness that made her heart swell. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I am going to spend every day proving it." "I love you too," Catherine whispered back. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for giving me and my baby a home." "Our baby," Kieran corrected gently. "From this moment forward, that child is ours." The baby came 3 weeks later, on a stormy April night that reminded Catherine painfully of the winter night when Kieran had found her. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Catherine was certain she could not endure another contraction, but Kieran stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand and encouraging her. "You can do this," he told her over and over. You are the strongest person I know. Just a little more, my love. Just a little more. Finally, just before dawn, the baby was born. The midwife from Genoa, who had arrived just in time, cleaned and swaddled the infant before placing the bundle in Catherine's arms. You have a son, she announced. Catherine looked down at the tiny red face and felt a wave of love so intense it nearly overwhelmed her. The baby had dark hair like hers and was already making his displeasure at being thrust into the cold world known with loud, indignant cries. He has good lungs, Kieran said with a laugh. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, his arm around Catherine's shoulders, staring at the baby with an expression of pure wonder. He is perfect. Would you like to hold him? Catherine asked, and Kieran nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he took the baby. The infant settled immediately against Kieran's chest, his cries fading to soft whimpers. Hello, little one, Kieran said softly. I am your papa. I am going to take such good care of you and your mama. I promise. Catherine watched through tears as Kieran rocked their son, marveling at how natural he looked, how right this all felt. This was her family now. This was home. What should we name him? Kieran asked, looking up at Catherine. Catherine thought for a moment, then said, What about Noah? It means rest in peace, and that is what you gave me when I needed it most. Noah Prescott, Kieran said, testing the name. I like it. Noah Prescott it is. The first weeks with the baby were exhausting, but joyful. Noah was a demanding infant who wanted to be held constantly and seemed to have his days and nights confused. Catherine was tired beyond measure, but every time she felt herself reaching the end of her rope, Kieran was there to help. He would walk the floor with Noah for hours, singing old cowboy songs and making up silly stories. He changed diapers without complaint and brought Catherine food and water while she nursed. You are a natural at this, Catherine told him one night as she watched him soothe a fussy Noah. I had good teachers, Kieran replied. My parents taught me that family takes work and patience. They taught me that love is not just a feeling, but a choice you make every single day. As spring turned to summer, life settled into a new rhythm. Catherine regained her strength and threw herself back into managing the household, though now with a baby strapped to her back much of the time. Noah thrived, growing plump and healthy, and his personality began to emerge. He was curious and social, always watching everything around him with wide, interested eyes. Kieran was completely besotted with his son. He could not walk past Noah without stopping to play with him, and he brought home small gifts from every trip to town, a carved wooden horse, a soft blanket, a tiny hat. He also insisted on being involved in every aspect of Noah's care, learning to change diapers and prepare bottles of sugar water for when Catherine needed a break from nursing. You are spoiling him, Catherine teased as Kieran bounced Noah on his knee, making the baby giggle. That is my right as his father, Kieran replied with mock seriousness. Besides, he deserves to be spoiled a little. He has had a rough start in life. But Noah's start, rough as it had been, was behind him now. He was surrounded by love and security, and as the months passed, Catherine sometimes had to remind herself that Kieran was not Noah's biological father. He was so devoted, so present, that it seemed impossible they were not connected by blood. Summer brought the hard work of running a ranch, and Catherine helped where she could, cooking meals for the ranch hands and managing the endless chores that came with feeding and housing several men. Tom and Billy Morrison had become like family, protective of Catherine and doting on Noah. The ranch was prospering under Kieran's careful management, and for the first time in years, he was able to set aside some savings. One warm July evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Kieran turned to Catherine. Are you happy? He asked. Catherine looked at him in surprise. Of course I am happy. Why would you ask? Because I want to make sure, Kieran said simply. I want to make sure you do not regret staying here, that you do not feel trapped or like you settled for less than you deserved. Katherine shifted Noah, who was sleeping in her arms, and reached out to take Kieran's hand. I regret nothing, she said firmly. This life, this family, you, that is everything I ever wanted. I did not settle, Kieran. I found something better than I ever dreamed possible. Kieran brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I feel the same way, he said. Every morning I wake up and cannot quite believe that you are real, that you chose me. We chose each other, Katherine corrected, and I would make the same choice 1,000 times over. As Noah's first birthday approached, Katherine found herself reflecting on the incredible journey of the past year. She had gone from being abandoned and hopeless to being surrounded by love and security. She had watched her son take his first steps with Kieran cheering him on. She had built a real partnership with a man who respected her and valued her opinions. She had created a home filled with warmth and laughter. For Noah's birthday, they had a small celebration with Tom and Billy and a few neighbors from surrounding ranches. Katherine baked a cake, and Noah smashed his piece enthusiastically, getting more on his face and clothes than in his mouth. Everyone laughed, and Kieran took a dozen pictures with a new camera he had bought in Carson City. I want to remember this, he explained to Katherine. I want Noah to have pictures of his childhood, to know how loved he was. That night, after the guests had left and Noah was asleep, Katherine and Kieran sat together by the fire. I have been thinking, Kieran said slowly. I would like to officially adopt Noah. I know he has my last name, and I am listed as his father on the birth certificate, but I want it to be legal in every sense. I want there to be no question that he is my son. Katherine felt tears spring to her eyes. You do not have to do that, she said. You have already given him so much. I want to, Kieran insisted. I want to make it official. I want him to know when he is old enough to understand that I chose him deliberately, that I wanted to be his father. Then yes, Katherine said, her voice thick with emotion. Let us make it official. The adoption was finalized in late fall, with the same justice of the peace who had married them overseeing the paperwork. Kieran signed the documents with a steady hand, and when it was done, he picked up Noah and held him close. Now it is legal, he said. You are mine and I am yours, forever and always. Life continued at steady pace. The ranch prospered, and Kieran was able to expand his herd and hire another ranch hand. Katherine's skills as a seamstress became known in the area, and she started taking on alterations and sewing projects for extra money, though Kieran always insisted she did not need to work. I like to contribute, Katherine explained. I like feeling useful. You are useful, Kieran protested. You run this entire household. And I also like to sew, Katherine said with a smile. Let me have this. Kieran relented, and Katherine's sewing business grew slowly but steadily. She enjoyed the creative outlet and the chance to connect with other women in the area. She was no longer the abandoned pregnant woman who had nearly frozen to death. She was Katherine Prescott, respected wife and mother, skilled seamstress, and integral part of the community. When Noah was 2 years old, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. She told Kieran one evening after Noah was in bed, suddenly nervous about his reaction. I am pregnant, she said without preamble. About 3 months along, I think. Kieran's face lit up with joy. Really? We are going to have another baby? You are happy? Katherine asked, relieved. Happy? I am overjoyed. Kieran swept her into his arms and spun her around, then immediately set her down, looking worried. Sorry, should I not have done that? I do not want to hurt you or the baby. Katherine laughed. I am fine. The baby is fine. You can spin me around. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Katherine was not dealing with the trauma of abandonment and was instead surrounded by love and support. Kieran was attentive and excited, already planning how to rearrange the house to accommodate another child. Noah, too young to really understand, seemed to sense that something was changing and became even more affectionate with Catherine, patting her growing belly and babbling to it in his toddler language. The baby, a daughter they named Grace, was born in early spring, just a few weeks after the anniversary of the night Kieran had found Catherine in the snow. The labor was shorter this time, and Grace entered the world with a lusty cry that announced her determination to be heard. "She looks like you," Kieran said, studying his daughter's tiny features. "She has your nose and your chin." Catherine looked at the baby in her arms and felt the same overwhelming rush of love she had felt with Noah. Grace had lighter hair than her brother, a soft brown that might turn blonde as she grew, and her eyes were a deep blue that might change color later. Noah, meeting his sister for the first time, was fascinated. He wanted to touch her constantly, patting her head with surprising gentleness for a 2-year-old. "Baby," he said proudly. "My baby." "Yes, your baby sister," Catherine confirmed. "You are going to be a wonderful big brother." And he was. As Grace grew, Noah appointed himself her protector and entertainer. He brought her his favorite toys, sang to her when she cried, and insisted on helping with everything from diaper changes to bath time. Kieran watched his children with obvious pride and love, and Catherine sometimes had to remind herself that only Noah had not come from his blood. It did not matter. Grace and Noah were both his in every way that counted. Life was full and busy with 2 young children. The house was rarely quiet, and Catherine often fell into bed exhausted at the end of the day. But she was deeply, profoundly happy. She had the family she had always dreamed of, and more importantly, she had a partner who treated her as an equal, who valued her opinions and contributions, who made her feel cherished every single day. As the years passed, the ranch continued to grow. Kieran's reputation as a fair and honest cattleman spread, and he was able to command good prices for his beef. They built an addition onto the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper washroom. Catherine's sewing business expanded to the point where she was regularly traveling to Carson City to meet with clients, always with Kieran accompanying her and the children. Noah grew into a bright, energetic boy who followed his father everywhere, eager to learn everything about ranching. By the time he was 5, he could already sit a horse competently and knew the names of all the cattle. Grace was more reserved, but equally intelligent, and she showed an early aptitude for numbers that delighted Kieran. "She is going to be the one who manages the books," he predicted. "Noah will run the day-to-day operations, and Grace will make sure we stay profitable." "They are still very young to be planning their futures," Catherine pointed out with amusement. "Never too young to dream," Kieran countered. When Noah was 7 and Grace was 5, Catherine found herself pregnant once more. She was 31 years old now, and this pregnancy was harder than the previous 2. She was tired constantly and struggled with nausea that lasted well into her second trimester. Kieran worried over her, insisting that she rest more and take on fewer responsibilities. "The children and I can manage," he told her. "You need to take care of yourself." Catherine tried to protest, but in truth she was grateful for the help. Kieran stepped up even more than usual, handling not just the ranch work, but much of the housework as well. Noah and Grace, sensing their mother needed extra care, were on their best behavior, helping with chores and entertaining each other without complaint. This baby, another son they named Samuel, was born in the winter, arriving during a snowstorm that reminded Catherine painfully of that first winter. But this time, she was safe and warm in her own home, surrounded by family, and the birth, while difficult, went smoothly. Samuel was a big baby, over 9 pounds, with a head of dark hair and a calm temperament that was immediately apparent. "He is going to be the easy one," the midwife predicted, and she was right. Samuel was a placid, contented baby who slept through the night almost immediately and rarely fussed. Noah and Grace adored their new brother. Noah, at 7, was old enough to be a real helper, fetching diapers and entertaining Samuel with silly faces. Grace, at 5, loved to sit next to Catherine while she nursed and tell Samuel stories. Once upon a time, there was a baby named Samuel who was very, very loved, she would begin, and Samuel would gaze at her with solemn eyes as if he understood every word. Kieran, now in his mid-30s, seemed to grow more handsome with age. His face had gained character lines, and there was silver beginning to show at his temples, but his gray eyes were as warm as ever when he looked at Catherine, and his devotion to his family never wavered. He was patient with the children, teaching them about the ranch and the land with endless enthusiasm. He made time for each of them individually, taking Noah out on horseback, helping Grace with her letters and numbers, and rocking Samuel to sleep every night while singing old ballads his own father had taught him. Catherine sometimes watched her husband with their children and felt her heart swell with love and gratitude. This man, who had started as a stranger offering shelter, had become her everything. He was her partner, her best friend, her lover, and the father of her children. He had taken her broken pieces and helped her become whole again. One evening, when Samuel was about 6 months old and sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Catherine and Kieran sat on the porch watching the sunset. The older children were playing in the yard, their laughter ringing through the cool evening air. "Do you remember the night we met?" Catherine asked softly. "Every detail," Kieran replied. "You were half frozen, terrified, and still the most beautiful thing I had ever seen." Catherine laughed. "I looked terrible." "You looked like you needed help," Kieran corrected, "and I am so grateful I was there to give it. That was the night my whole life changed." "Mine too," Catherine said. She leaned her head against Kieran's shoulder. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you had not found me, if you had not stopped to help." "Do not think about that," Kieran said firmly. He wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close. "You are here. You are safe. We are together. That is all that matters." "I love you," Catherine said. "I do not say it enough, but I love you so much. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me too," Kieran replied. "I was just going through the motions before you came. Working, sleeping, existing, but not really living. You gave me purpose and joy. You gave me a family. You gave me everything." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the sky darkened and stars began to appear. Noah called out that he had seen a shooting star, and Grace ran to tell them about a rabbit she had spotted near the barn. These were the moments Catherine treasured, the simple, everyday magic of life with the people she loved most. As the children grew older, the house remained full of activity and noise. Noah became increasingly skilled at ranch work, and by the time he was 12, he was working alongside the ranch hands during the summer, learning to rope and brand cattle. He had his father's steady temperament and his mother's determination, a combination that served him well. Grace developed into a thoughtful, intelligent girl who loved books and learning. Kieran made sure she had access to as many books as he could find, and he hired a tutor from Carson City to come once a week to give her and Noah proper lessons. Grace soaked up knowledge like a sponge, and by the time she was 10, she was helping her father with the ranch accounts and showing a head for business that impressed everyone who met her. Samuel, the youngest, was the family's jokester. He had an infectious laugh and a talent for getting into mischief, though he was never malicious. He kept everyone entertained with his antics and had a special bond with his father, following Kieran around whenever possible and asking endless questions about everything. Catherine watched her children grow with pride and a little sadness, knowing that these years were precious and fleeting. But she also looked forward to the future, to seeing what kind of adults her children would become, to meeting the people they would love, to holding grandchildren someday. The ranch continued to prosper, and Kieran's hard work and good management meant that they were financially secure. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, and that was enough. Kieran made sure to set aside money for the children's futures, determined that they would have opportunities he had never had. When Noah was 15, a terrible drought hit Nevada. The grass turned brown and brittle, and water sources dried up. Kieran worked tirelessly to keep the cattle alive, hauling water from the few remaining springs and moving the herd to wherever he could find grazing. It was a stressful, exhausting time, and Katherine saw the toll it took on her husband. He lost weight, and new lines appeared on his face. "We will get through this," Katherine told him one night as they lay in bed. "We have survived worse." "I know," Kieran said, "but I hate seeing the land suffer like this. I hate losing cattle that I have raised from calves." "The rains will come," Katherine said, with more confidence than she felt, "and we will rebuild. We always do." The drought finally broke in late fall, and when the rains came, they came in torrents. The dry ground could not absorb the water fast enough, and there was flooding in the low-lying areas. But the grass began to grow again, green and lush, and slowly the land recovered. Kieran had lost a third of his herd, but the remaining cattle were healthy, and he had enough to rebuild. That winter, as they celebrated Christmas with their children, Kieran made a toast. "To resilience," he said, raising his glass, "to family, to love, and to the knowledge that we can weather any storm as long as we are together." "To family," Katherine echoed, and the children repeated the toast in their young voices. As Katherine looked around the table at the faces she loved most in the world, she felt a deep sense of contentment. Her life had not turned out the way she had planned all those years ago when she married James and headed west. It had turned out so much better. She had a husband who loved and respected her, children who were thriving, and a home that was filled with warmth and happiness. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and milestones. Noah fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher when he was 19, and Kieran and Katherine gave the young couple their blessing. The wedding was held at the ranch, with half the county in attendance, and Katherine cried happy tears as she watched her son pledge his life to his bride. "I feel old," she whispered to Kieran as they watched Noah and his new wife dance their first dance. "You're beautiful," Kieran replied, pulling her close. "And we are not old. We are experienced." Katherine laughed and let Kieran lead her onto the dance floor. They swayed together to the music, and Katherine rested her head against Kieran's chest, listening to his heartbeat. After all these years, his touch could still make her feel like a young woman in love for the first time. Grace, at 17, announced that she wanted to go to school in San Francisco to study business. Kieran was hesitant at first, worried about his daughter being so far from home, but Katherine encouraged him to let her go. "She is smart and capable," Katherine said. "We raised her to be independent. We have to let her spread her wings." So Grace went to San Francisco, and she excelled in her studies. She wrote home every week, long letters full of details about her classes and the city. Kieran kept every letter in a special box, rereading them when he missed his daughter. Samuel, at 14, was still at home and showing signs of becoming an excellent horseman. He had a natural rapport with animals and a fearless streak that occasionally gave his parents heart attacks, but he was also kind and responsible, and Kieran trusted him with increasingly important tasks around the ranch. Katherine, now in her 40s, found herself with more free time than she had had in years. Her sewing business was still thriving, and she had taken on a young woman from town as an apprentice. She also became involved in organizing community events and helping new families who came to the area, remembering how much Kieran's kindness had meant to her all those years ago. "You are always taking care of everyone else," Kieran observed one evening. "Make sure you take care of yourself, too." "I learned from the best," Katherine replied, kissing his cheek. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Kieran surprised Katherine with a trip to San Francisco. They left the ranch in Noah's capable hands and took the train west, spending a week in the bustling city. They visited Grace, who showed them around her school and introduced them to her professors. They went to the theater, dined in fancy restaurants, and walked along the waterfront holding hands like young lovers. "This has been wonderful," Katherine said on their last night in the city. They were sitting in their hotel room, and she was leaning against Kieran, completely content. "Thank you for this." "Thank you for 20 years," Kieran replied. 20 years of happiness and love and partnership. I would not trade a single day of it. Not even the hard days? Catherine asked with a smile. Especially not the hard days, Kieran said. Those are the days that proved how strong we are together. Those are the days that showed me exactly how lucky I am to have you. Catherine turned in his arms and kissed him deeply. I am the lucky one, she said. You took a broken, frightened woman and gave her a reason to live again. You loved me when I did not think I deserved love. You raised my son as your own and never once made me feel like I owed you anything. You are the best man I have ever known, Kieran Prescott. They made love that night with the tenderness and passion of a couple who knew each other completely, who had built a life together through joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Kieran traced lazy patterns on Catherine's back. I want to grow old with you, he said quietly. I want to watch our grandchildren grow up and teach them to ride and rope. I want to sit on the porch with you when we are 80 and watch the sunset and remember all the adventures we had. That sounds perfect, Catherine agreed. That sounds like exactly the life I want. They returned to the ranch, refreshed and reconnected, ready to face whatever came next. And what came next was more joy than Catherine had thought possible. Noah and his wife had their first child, a daughter they named Catherine after her grandmother. Holding her tiny namesake, Catherine felt the circle of life completing itself. This baby would never know hunger or cold or abandonment. She would grow up surrounded by love and security, part of a family that would always protect her. Grace graduated with honors and returned to Nevada, but instead of settling on the ranch, she opened her own business in Carson City, a bookkeeping and accounting firm that quickly became successful. She visited often, and she never lost her close bond with her family. Samuel, at 18, announced that he wanted to become a horse breeder. Kieran gave him a portion of land on the ranch and helped him build his own small house and stable. Samuel threw himself into his new venture with enthusiasm, and within a few years, he had built a reputation for breeding quality horses. As Catherine entered her 50s, she found herself reflecting more and more on the journey that had brought her here. Sometimes, particularly in winter, she would look out at the snow and remember that desperate, terrified woman she had been. It seemed like a lifetime ago, like a different person entirely. And in many ways it was. That Catherine had been broken by betrayal and hardship. This Catherine was strong and confident, secure in the love of her family and her place in the world. Do you ever think about him? Kieran asked one day. They were sitting on the porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. It had been 25 years since the night Kieran had found Catherine in the snow. Catherine knew immediately that Kieran was asking about James. No, she said honestly. I have not thought about him in years. He is not part of my life, not part of my story. You are my story, Kieran. You and our children and this beautiful life we have built together. Kieran took her hand and squeezed it gently. Good, he said. Because you are my story too. You are my every chapter, my beginning and my middle and my ending. You are everything. Catherine looked at her husband, at the silver in his hair, and the lines on his face that spoke of years of laughter and hard work and love. He was older now, as was she, but he was still the man who had stopped in a snowstorm to help a stranger. He was still the man who had opened his heart and his home without reservation. He was still the best decision she had ever made. I love you, she said simply. Now and always. Now and always, Kieran echoed. As they sat together in the fading light, surrounded by the sounds of family and home, Catherine felt a profound sense of peace. Her life had not been easy, but it had been rich and full. She had known deep sorrow and even deeper joy. She had loved and been loved in return. She had raised children who were good and kind and strong. She had built something lasting and beautiful. The sun set slowly over the Sierra Nevada mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. In the yard, Noah scooped up his daughter and spun her around, making her giggle with delight. Grace arrived in a wagon, calling out greetings and bringing news from town. Samuel led a new horse out of the stable, its coat gleaming in the evening light. This was her legacy, Katherine thought. Not wealth or fame, but love and family, and the knowledge that she had made a difference in the lives of the people who mattered most. This was what it meant to have lived well. Years continued to unfold, like the pages of a beloved book. More grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with noise and laughter. Katherine taught the girls to sew and the boys to cook, determined that all of them would have practical skills regardless of their gender. Kieran taught them all to ride and rope, to respect the land and the animals, to be honest and hardworking. When Katherine was 58 and Kieran 60, they celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary with a large party that included friends and family from all over Nevada. Noah gave a toast that brought tears to Katherine's eyes. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who showed me what real love looks like, who taught me that family is not just about blood, but about choice and commitment and showing up every day, who gave me and my siblings the best possible start in life, and who continue to be the foundation of our family. Thank you for everything." Katherine looked around the room at the faces of her children, her grandchildren, her extended family, and friends. Every single person there was connected to her because of the choice Kieran had made 25 years ago to stop and help a stranger. Every joy she had experienced, every triumph, every moment of love and happiness could be traced back to that single act of kindness. "What are you thinking?" Kieran whispered in her ear. "I am thinking about how one decision can change everything," Katherine replied. "I am thinking about how grateful I am that you stopped that night, that you did not just ride past." "I could never have ridden past you," Kieran said. "It was not even a choice. The moment I saw you, I knew my life was about to change. I just did not know how much or how wonderfully." As the party continued around them, Kieran led Katherine outside to the porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the air was cool and fresh. "Dance with me," Kieran said, and even though there was no music, Katherine stepped into his arms. They swayed together under the stars, moving to a rhythm only they could hear, and Katherine felt 17 again, full of hope and possibility. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For everything. For saving me. For loving me. For giving me the most beautiful life I could have imagined." "Thank you for letting me," Kieran replied. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for building this life with me." They danced until the party wound down and their children and grandchildren began departing. They stood on the porch and waved goodbye, arms around each other, and then they went inside to their home, their haven, the place where their love had grown and flourished. In the years that followed, Katherine and Kieran slowed down, as all people must eventually do. They handed more and more responsibility to Noah and Samuel, content to become advisors rather than primary workers. They spent their days tending a small garden, playing with their great-grandchildren when they came to visit, and simply enjoying each other's company. Katherine's hair turned completely white, and Kieran's joints ached on cold mornings, but neither of them complained. They had lived full, rich lives, and they were grateful for every moment they had been given. On a warm spring day, when Katherine was 72 and Kieran was 74, they sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch was thriving under Noah's management, and Grace had just announced that she was going to be a grandmother herself. Samuel's horse breeding business was now known throughout Nevada and California. Their family tree had grown branches in directions Katherine could never have predicted, but every single one was rooted in the love she and Kieran shared. "It has been a good life," Katherine said, holding Kieran's hand. "The best life," Kieran agreed. "I would not change a single thing. Not even the hard parts?" "Especially not the hard parts," Kieran said, echoing words he had spoken decades earlier. "The hard parts made us stronger. They taught us what we were capable of surviving. They made the good parts even sweeter." Katherine nodded, her head resting against Kieran's shoulder. I am so glad you found me that night, she said. I am so glad you stopped. I am glad I found you too, Kieran said. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Katherine Prescott. Then, now, and always. They sat together as the sun set once more over the mountains, painting the sky in colors they had seen thousands of times, but never tired of. In the house behind them, they could hear the sounds of family, of life continuing, of the legacy they had built together. Katherine closed her eyes and smiled, feeling completely and utterly at peace. This was what happy endings looked like, she thought. Not perfection, but presence. Not the absence of pain, but the abundance of love. Not fairy tales, but real life, lived fully and honestly with a partner who chose you every single day. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that if she had to do it all again, make all the same choices, endure all the same hardships, she would do it in a heartbeat. Because those choices, those hardships, had led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this beautiful, imperfect, absolutely perfect life. The night settled gently over the ranch, wrapping it in darkness and starlight. Inside the house, Kieran and Katherine prepared for bed with the easy familiarity of decades together. They did not need words anymore to communicate. A look, a touch, a smile was enough. They had built a language all their own over the years, composed of shared memories and private jokes, and the deep understanding that comes from truly knowing another person. As they lay in bed, Katherine's head on Kieran's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she thought about all the winters they had weathered together, all the springs they had celebrated, all the summers and falls that had marked the passage of their years. She thought about the children they had raised, and the grandchildren who carried pieces of them forward into the future. She thought about the ranch, this land that Kieran loved so deeply and had taught her to love as well. Kieran, she whispered into the darkness. Yes, my love. I just wanted to say your name, to remind myself that this is real, that you are real. Kieran's arms tightened around her. I am real, he assured her. And so is this. So are we. And we will be, for as long as we both shall live. And beyond that, Katherine added. And beyond that, Kieran agreed. They fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, as they had done for over 35 years, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and built a light so bright it illuminated not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone around them. Their love story was not dramatic or flashy. It was quiet and steady, built on small daily choices and unwavering commitment. It was real. And that, Katherine thought in the moment before sleep claimed her, was the very best kind of love story there was, the kind that lasted, the kind that mattered, the kind that changed the world, one heart at a time. Outside, the Nevada wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow, and all the tomorrows yet to come. The ranch slept, secure and peaceful, a testament to hard work and dedication and love. And inside the house, in the room where Katherine had first slept as a frightened, abandoned woman, she now slept as a cherished wife, a beloved mother and grandmother, a woman who had survived and thrived and built something beautiful from the ashes of her broken dreams. The story that had begun on a cold winter night with an act of kindness from a stranger had become an epic of love and family that would echo through generations. Noah would tell his children about how his father had saved his mother, and they would tell their children, and the story would become legend, a reminder that kindness matters, that love endures, that happy endings are possible even after the darkest nights. And years later, when Katherine and Kieran were both gone, their great-great-grandchildren would walk the land they had tended and wonder about the two people whose love had made it all possible. They would see their names carved in the porch railing, intertwined forever, and they would know that they came from love, that they were built on a foundation of sacrifice and dedication and unwavering commitment to family. But that was still far in the future. For now, in this present moment, Catherine and Kieran simply held each other through the night, living proof that sometimes the greatest love stories are not the ones that begin with love at first sight, but the ones that begin with simple human kindness and grow, slowly and steadily, into something that can weather any storm and last beyond the boundaries of a single lifetime.